And welcome to Adventures into Reality. It is going to be a Super Bowl special revelation of a show. I am joined by the infamous Debbie. Welcome to the show, Debbie. How you doing today?
Good, thank you, Andrew. It's wonderful to be here, and I'm just looking forward to this great show.
Me too. So we have been looking and scouring over all of the people that sent submissions into our Super Bowl special of remote viewing. And over the last 4 or 5 days now, we've all been, figuring out what is on here, who wins, and what kind of rules that we were going to adhere by. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the revelation of what the pictures were. The first one was the Earth with a little picture of the moon in the background. The second one was a sailboat with just the sails with a little bit of water. And the third one was the final score of the Super Bowl. Now, only one person got the actual score, but that same person didn't get the names of the teams right. Okay?
That's marvelous.
That's marvelous. So let's talk what it's like when we see stuff and how we intuit energy and how we try to formulate what it is. I looked at a lot of the submissions list, and there's just a wide variety. One person says it's a dollar bill, and then two other people describe a dollar bill. Okay? So here's another person that says a picture of an octopus. Okay, a big tree in blue skies. Okay, smudging sticks, a postcard, something like the word please. Okay, and then I can't tell you how many different scores of people who don't even know what football are, like with a score of like 80 to 90.
Well, the wonderful thing is that everybody put their mind to it and tried to envision what it was. So I think they've done a great effort, because when I was going through, there's quite a few people who picked up on even the colour blue. And the way our mind works a lot of the time is when we see a colour, our mind tries to put a picture to it. Or if we see one little symbol, our mind tries to put a picture to it. And so it's not always the right picture that we're getting, but we're getting something.
Absolutely. We're getting the vision without eye vision. And we have to translate that into written words. That is a different form of vision. We're going through that infinite translation process so that this I am presence gets its confirmation from using that infinite source.
Right. It takes a lot of practice, actually, to be able to get that down.
Oh, yeah, it does. It takes that practice and trust of the self. Mm-hmm. In the trust of the self is where we can really capture our abilities to do remote view. When I decided to do the Super Bowl special and to make remote viewing a part of that was so that people came out of their shells and began to try. I have tried and tried and tried to get people to be healers, and we've done a great job here at the League of Consciousness Explorers of gathering a group of people that are healers, that are counselors, that are the next level of elders who are ready to take over the torch of eldership through their own self-study and self-understanding of spiritual hygiene and what haunting is, of your neighborhood or of your own family, what ancestral haunting is, and how to simply deal with it by having a natural life where you make sure that the proper offerings are in the proper place. Otherwise, things get out of control and really dense. Now, the Super Bowl is considered a really dense energy because there's millions and millions of people watching it. But at the end of the day, there were lots of people that were never intending to remote view the score of the game that guessed it.
Well, they did, and it's just trusting what comes to you first. And I think a lot of people did some great stuff. Some were really close.
Yeah, some of them were in that 10 words. They did everything that they could possibly do. It's just Okay, hold on. There's this one. So this person just put boat on a sea of life, okay? And another person put small boat on tranquil lake surrounded by a forest, but that isn't a sailboat. And
Why?
in the image of that was there was no forest in the background, and there's actually very little water in it. So did this person catch something? They caught a glimmer, and their mind was very much trying to get it to linguistically be right. So we call that a really good response. And could we have made that one a winner? Without the sailboat part, you can't, because it's clearly a sailboat.
Right, it was. But they, I would give them, good 6 points out of 10 for that try, because at least they got, the symbol of a boat, regardless of it's the full outline of it. Yeah. But some people got really, close numbers, got, saw very similar planets, and it's probably just to differentiate what sort of planet that was that they were seeing, whether it was Earth or the Moon or Pleiades or whatever.
Yeah, they were seeing what they needed to see at that moment, and that's kind of having to go through that, what do I call it, the dirty energy underwear. And then there's the information field. So once you've understood the dirty energy underwear environments there, and you don't have to deal with it on energy, you can get to the next layer, which is the information field, which is everything is out there in the uncollective, and then the collective mind's trying to reverse engineer the uncollective. That's our conscious subconscious. And we can tap into the doorway between the collective and uncollective consciousness and find a moment of silence to have vision without vision, internal knowingness.
Right, that inner vision that you were talking about earlier.
So let's talk about internal knowingness, vision without vision, because we don't have words to describe what it is when you're experiencing something that is simulating vision but does not use these eyes and does not process in the motor cortex like the eyes either.
Right, so it's trusting that inner vision when you get that inner picture in your mind's eye. It's like when you're trying to visualize or doing a visualization. It's you're not doing it with your outer sense. You're doing it from an inner sense, and it's the same sort of thing that when you're focusing on something, and you're trying to remote view. If a picture flashes up, you get that inner vision of a picture or a number. That's what you've got to trust.
You got to trust, and that's that precipice of trust I spoke about on the Superbowl show. You've got a big, wide open chasm, and the only thing that's there is your belief that you cannot go over that chasm without being hurt. It's the trust of the self. The great adventurers and explorers looked at that chasm and figured out a way around or created a way through it.
Yeah, there's no really easy way of doing remote view other than just going in and getting into the practice of doing it and trusting what you see, and just focusing in and honing in on those skills.
So some of the other skills that people exhibited were a little bit of emotional connection skills, and some of the as somebody said, a heart-shaped flower. A big person in love. So there's all sorts of things that some people might have been struggling for words, and think of that more of struggling for trust. Okay? So next week, this next Friday's show, we're going to have another remote view. But I would like people to remote view the envelope I'm going to do on next Friday's show. So you have a whole week to try, a whole week. And yes, you will only be able to enter them on the enter your thing on the live show, and we will determine from there how we're going to do this remote view. We're probably going to have a part of a show dedicated specifically to that, because I've had a lot of people that have been sending emails to me about wanting to take that skill to the next level. And if we dedicate 15 minutes to our shows each week, in 6 or 7 weeks from now, we can have a really powerful group of people that are in their knowingness and can begin to research things other than the score of a game or the pictures in an envelope, where we can have an army of remote viewers descend upon an ancient place in an ancient time and intuit truth. We have that power. We just need some of the technical skills of self-trust.
Right, Andrew, I agree. And I think that's a wonderful thing to do. It's actually exciting that we're getting so many people to want to participate and do something so great.
Yes, and we are going to have one heck of a year. And as people have been seeing, our green screen room is, we had a show in there the last week. We are going to be filming in there, as we are going to be continuing our alchemy series. We will be doing our live shows hopefully in 2 weeks from now, starting direct from the green screen room. We've got some really, really cool effects that we're going to be sharing with people. So some of the techniques that we have in the green screen room help people to understand the multidimensional self. The reason I chose this background today is it has 2 screens. So I want you to imagine, Debbie right here, me right here, and another version of me right here. And now that version of me right here is going to be pre-recorded, and it's going to be mumble, 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 a whole bunch of really cool words, mumble, mumble, as I talk back and forth between myself and Debbie talks to us. And that's an example of self-conversations. Another scenario is where you have another version of me that's recorded in a different space and time, showing what empathy between dimensions is. Or you could have a person here and you have a foreground version of me, and that foreground version of me may have 7, 8, or 9 people in front of it. And all of those people will be interlinked into this multidimensional conversation that we're going to be able to show with the green screen room. The new stations, they do some really, really fun things with their green screen rooms. But now we're applying it to multidimensional living and going to be able to show people through this green screen, through the picture-in-picture, through the pre-record, of how you can see an example of multidimensional living.
That's exciting. I'm really looking forward to seeing that myself, Andrew.
Well, me too. I have been thinking long and hard what type of technology is going to take us to the next level. We've done Galactic History 1, and when I decided that I wanted to do Galactic History 2, I knew I needed the pictures. For all those people that have seen the Galactic History series, I described some intense subjects when it comes to time, space, galactic ascension machine, and those need images to attach to the words.
Right. It's going to be quite something. I'm looking forward to it.
What we would like is for anyone that would like to feature some of your artwork for our green screen room, anything that is a panoramic picture. If you go into the League of Consciousness Explorers and you go into the boards over there, you will see a thread for sharing of panoramic pictures. So we are going to be looking for as many people that want to share their images, whether it's a picture of a mountain or a sacred place that you visited. As long as it's a panoramic picture, it can be inserted into the background of our green screen room. So please share with us your pictures, and if you're not a part of the League of Consciousness Explorers, you can send a message to the Galactic Asaurian support team, and then we can get an attachment picture from you there also. So we want to thank everybody that's going to be a part of those upcoming green screen room shows, as well as the people that have decided they really, 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 really want to do this remote viewing thing. So I'm going to offer a second thing. So this coming Friday, you have a chance to remote view what an envelope is. In 2 or so weeks from now, we're not exactly sure, we're going to have our first green screen room show that I will have an envelope for. So in an undisclosed date, in an undisclosed time, there will be a live show in which I'm going to hold up an envelope for the very first green screen broadcast room. Who wants to reach out this far away to figure out what's going to be in that envelope?
Well, it'll be surprising to see how many people do, Andrew. I think that's wonderful.
I ask you to take up the challenge. A few minutes of your time, clearing your thoughts, and really think, okay, what could we put in an envelope that can help people see a few weeks from now in an undisclosed place, in an undisclosed time, that there will be a live show? We're going to have some special things.
So, Andrew, are you going to announce any of the winners for this last month?
We are going to contact all the winners privately. And then the winners will be on the show live with us, because we're going to have them all on one show where they're going to drive the conversation, where they are going to be you. They are going to be the ones asking and driving the questions. That's the kind of rewards we're giving people that are beginning to practice these skills and beginning to just do it on their own with the heart smile.
Well, I think that's a great incentive.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, Andrew, so I just wanted to put something to you, because it's something that I've been going through, my family have been going through, people we know have been going through and experiencing just recently, probably for the last several weeks, or maybe even longer, with a lot more other stuff going on. But just yesterday, the babysitter of my daughters was coming back from Bellevue, and she got held up. There was a major accident there. The car flipped over. My husband went out last night. There was 2 accidents on the road, one going to where he was going to and another one when he was coming back. And I'm just thinking, there just seems to be so much chaos and accidents happening lately that I'm just wondering if there's something that we aren't seeing, or is there something going on in the matrix that we need to know about?
Yes, there is a lot of things going on. And let me use the metaphor of the Pied Piper. So the Pied Piper gets invited to a town to use his magic flute to lure all the mice and rats away from a town. And when he doesn't get paid, he leads the mice back into the city. In a metaphor, these people that are going through these heavy, dense, dramatic times, the Pied Piper's musical stuff that's coming through is the metaphorical way of describing the system of domination and control, attracting you to the similar density beings as you, so that you can have retribution from karma, or relief from karma, or karmic debt being given to. It's the mechanics of the system. And the system is at a point where it was audited in March 2013, and it has an end date where it must have all of its karma paid off. Essentially what you do is have a bunch of spiritual companies spread all over the world that have been cooking their books for billions of years, and now it's time to come and pay the Pied Piper, which is the universal source, acting in communion and union with Earth Mind over many millions of years, to create a final equation where karma can no longer be used as a debt exchange soul commerce system. So what is happening now is the debt collectors are coming to call, literally.
So is it coming in that form of like the chaos, or?
Yeah, it's coming in that form. It is going to force people to be awake or asleep. Do you take your karmic lunks and go back to sleep and say, "Thank you, system, may I have another?" Okay? Or you go, "No, system, you cannot do that to me. I am a sovereign, free-willed individual being, separate of your dirty energy underwear, who no longer uses karmic debt as an exchange for spiritual karma."
Right, so would that be good to use the revocations on our karmic debt and release?
In general, any kind of contract revocation, it isn't even if they're mine, any of them at all, declaring the I am present statements now is one of the most advantageous things for you, because it means that you're not easy pickings. There are tens of millions of entities spread around the world that have a list. Get the most amount of energy you can without having to invest a lot of energy. So there's not long-term plans. They're hitting up all the short-term, easy feed people that don't protect themselves, that don't do spiritual sovereignty, that don't practice spiritual cleanliness, and simply allow their energy environment to have anything in it at any moment in time. Those are the ones that are getting hit. The ones that forget, every 5, 6, 7 days, did you take time for yourself? Did you maybe just turn the television off and just be at peace with yourself? Have you asked yourself the self-calculating questions every month? Have I been a good person? Can I accept love from other people? Am I able to love other people? Where you do some of those checks each month to make sure that you're not getting callous. And for those people out there that are healers, after a while you can get callous to the mystical experience of healing others.
That's a really interesting thing to think of too, Andrew, because there's so many people in that healing industry, but they don't take time out for themselves. They're so busy healing everybody else.
That's right. They've taken on the karmic debt of being the healer.
Mm.
Okay?
Right.
Think of what it was like when you decided you went and took cranial sacral therapy.
Yeah, well, I basically did that. I wanted to do that basically for my family because there were so many physical problems going on within, my grandchildren, my daughters. So I thought, there's something else I can do besides just regression work, if I could do some actual healing work as well. And I have done other types of healing energy work, and but to have the understanding with the cranial sacral, it's just another a great tool to have, just like you have with Reiki.
Yeah, and it's so powerful to use with children that are growing cranial sacral therapy.
Yes.
There are so many autistic children that could be benefited greatly and their quality of lives increased many-fold by regular cranial sacral treatments.
I know a friend of mine who has been doing cranial sacral for many, many years, and she's had people bring their babies to her because of the compression on the brain that has really slowed down their growth. And she just said she's seen it totally unravel in front of her eyes, and the families are just amazed by the growth and the brain activity increases just from the cranial sacral.
Right. Like you pop the cork, and all of a sudden they start to grow.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen it myself. Dozens of times when I was doing some very intense Reiki treatments with very young babies that had vaccination poisoning, as well as some in the 5, 6, 7-year-old. And literally it's like a cork that's popped when the cranial sacral therapist connects to the spine and the tailbone, and you have somebody working with the feet. Literally it's like their body can grow in front of you.
Now that happened to my grandson, actually. He just seemed to be really short, and everybody used to be a bit of the brunt of the jokes for all his buddies at school. And I actually took him to a really good chiropractor that stretched him, beside the cranial sacral. He needed something else, and the chiropractor told him that his bones were really compressed, and he did this just one release by pulling his neck really, just gave this big jerk up his whole spine just went pop, 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 pop. And he grew about 2.5 inches through summer. He couldn't believe it.
Wow. Wow, yeah. That tells you something.
It does.
When I was young, I must have been 12, maybe 13, my uncle, who had been taking an advanced traditional Chinese medicine class, acupuncture, acupressure, and had been learning some chiropractic, he had come home to Cleveland, so he was there for Christmas, and he was just showing off all of his techniques. And he went to go do a back reset on me, and I'm just, like I said, a small kid at that point. And he put me in this position like a full Nelson and pulled my back up, and from my tailbone to the back of my neck went, and he stopped and he went, "Oh my God, are you paralyzed?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, I totally could feel." And he literally said, "I swear to God, every single bone in your spine cracked."
Yeah, exactly with my grandson, exactly the same thing. And he probably, who knows how long he had that,
Probably since birth in some scenarios. That's birth trauma. When people assume a position and always talk from it, some of that is residual image from other lifetimes that were very difficult. And the only way they can come through this lifetime is in the residual posture that imitates depression, regression, obsession, deep intellectual thought, deep consciousness, exploration, so on and so forth, because the body remembers these positions in which we can have these mystical experiences that are connected to our parasympathetic body.
I've actually seen that when I've been doing regression work with people. I've actually seen physical changes. You know, and some of them have come in with massive headaches as well, and they can't believe how that goes. But sometimes when I'm taking people through a regression, they'll they'll get a pain in their side or a pain in their chest, and it relates to, as it unravels, it relates to something that they were experiencing in that lifetime, either being crushed through, you know, some scenario that goes on. But after it, their whole body has changed in the way that they hold themselves. They said they can breathe easier. It's really interesting when they let these thoughts come out of their cells and release.
Mm-hmm. When you let the energy out of the cells, you're allowing the sympathetic and parasympathetic body to go let down, and to not be on warning for spiritual energy or physical energy being coming in or taken out. Our sympathetic body is our empathetic side that is connected to our physical body and our spirit's needs and ideas, which are connected to the soul. The soul and spirit are two different things. The soul is the spark fuel that comes in, and yes, your spark fuel can be drawn out, and you need, after a while, more energy for your soul. That's how the spark of the spirit comes in, which is the infinite connection, which refills the coffers that are the physical body. You know, like some of the meridians are called well points, because that is where chi generates in a big infinite well of energy for us to draw upon at any point in time. Like the gallbladder and stomach meridians that are in the legs, you know, those connect the stomach meridian to literally the food of abundance in the fields of plenty that are available to everyone. There's food, you know, within 15 feet of me outside of this window. Food I may not call, you know, top-notch food. It's food off the trees, but at one point in our history, that was the food. And our parasympathetic bodies are still DNA tuned to the food 6 miles from us. And we need not actually pick it. We can absorb that energy from miles away if we really choose to, because we are that much of a multidimensional being when we choose to follow through with our belief system and not be zealotous with it.
I've even noticed that just the fragrance from some of those trees or flowers or plants have a healing aspect, and that's probably why the essential oils are so powerful.
Absolutely. When you take an essential oil from something, you're taking its essence, distilled spirit essence that it has volunteered for this purpose. A tree wouldn't produce an essence like that if it wasn't offering it of service to everyone. And that's the wonderful thing about the trees out there. So many of the trees in our world are not indigenous here. But one of the great ancient indigenous trees to our world is the sequoia tree. You know, some of the oldest sequoias here in the world were 3,000 years old. They could tell that in the ancient mapping of the old growth forests. And the general Sherman oak, which just fell down in the Sequoia National Forest, was, I believe, 1,800 years old before it came down, and like 600 feet tall.
That's amazing. I know that down in the Maya-land area, the sequoia tree is actually classed as a holy tree.
Yep, like the cactus, like the king cactus. They are some of the most powerful, dense, ancient spirits that have chose to come here for a very, very long, extended time of life. Just a second, my phone is ringing. It should never be ringing. Sorry about that.
That's okay, Andrew. I do have a question for you, though. I was just wondering, do the trees have a soul? Your sound is cut out.
All right, here we go. Yes, they do have souls. They do have spark. They do have spirit. They do have a life like us. They do have a consciousness like us. But their consciousness is not centered in a brain. It's not centered in a chakra system or a heart or a birthing system. They come from seed. And their seed has their entire gene stock of all of the memories of all of the other trees who have been trees, not just here, but on any other world where those seeds were shared. So they come in as a hive mind. So if one tree lets go of 10,000 seeds, and all 10,000 of those seeds end up on a different planet, each seed becomes its own psychic network of anything that it reproduces seeds from in any generation. When, let's say, those trees that were spread to the 10,000 worlds were to come together, a whole new generation of sentience would be created, and a new migration pattern of souls would be in those trees. So it is like a long-standing lighthouse marker stone into the big process of, how do I describe it, having life.
Right, it just reminds me a bit of the Avatar, the movie, where they were showing the mother tree there was connected to all the other trees, as like a consciousness that would spread right through the forest.
Very much. That movie Avatar has lots of disclosure behind it, a tremendous amount of disclosure.
Right. I'm also wondering, we're talking about trees, but at the moment I've just noticed on the news they're doing this whole thing about whales. And I'm just wondering whether, and the dolphins and everything, what do they represent in the galactic history,
Whales are the record keepers of the ocean. For everything that is below the ocean, there has been another version that's been above the ocean, and for everything that's been above the ocean, it's been below the ocean. And the whale's song is impressed and impregnated into every section of the rock and every section of the world. Whale uses sonar or echolocation at some of the most advanced levels. Now, there are people that meditate to whale songs. There are people that go out on whale sightings. And there are people that have their mystical experiences from a single whale popping up out of the water, showing them their mystical, showing them the blue underbelly. They are mystical creatures that not only can exist just in water, but they can spiritually travel off of our planet and still be in their physical body. And they can, how do I describe it, bilocate into zero space in between spaces of planets and be a like energy vessel for people. Much like I described some of the elemental dragons that go from planet to planet and guide people from point A to point B, the whale is another expression that guides people from point A to point B. But the energy whale, what a pod of whales would do is they would come together psychically in the deep ocean, a few hundred feet apart, and they'd start singing in a great harmony. And they'd start dreaming in a great harmony. And those pod of whales, 40, 50 of them, would become one unity consciousness energy being that would essentially remote project itself from its 50-plus physical bodies and manifest a uni-being off-world in space with no oxygen and nothing in between it but the void between worlds. And then that unimind comes together and makes an energy body and can invite other travelers that are in the void there that want to go on long-distance trips using the echolocation, the psychic echolocation skills of the unimind being, thus the 50 beings still on the planet, to go and search out for specific soul code frequencies.
And what would that enable them to do?
Find anything in the world, in the universe that you want.
Oh.
If you have the signature frequency, the whales can hunt it down or search it out.
Did they have a significant reason for being here?
Yes.
For mankind?
They can hold some of the most dense overminds, 6th and 7th dimensional overminds, people that have decided that they don't want to be one being anymore ever again, and so they decide to be 10,000 beings for the last 5 million years, and they can't fit into one body, but they can fit into one whale body. and still have an experience that's psychically beneficial to them, that still has the chance of karmic exchange to reach zero balance. The biomechanics, the DNA biomechanics of whale and how its memories are stored in its blubber. One of the reasons human beings were burning blubber was to get rid of the DNA memories of the whale, was to create a destruction of it that way. That's why we were burning the whale oil when there were plenty of other sources at that time to burn oil.
Right. What about the dolphins? Are they similar?
No. The dolphin, much like human being, was meant to inhabit its own world and grow on its own, but its original home world became unsuitable for it. It's not that there were destructions, its consciousness needed a different planet. And much like children who leave their home for the first time and go and set up an apartment somewhere else, the whales came to Earth and they set up an apartment, and then the dolphins came here and set up an apartment. And after a while it was a whole apartment building, and after a while it was a whole ocean of them. At the same time, human beings were incarnating here and going through timeline genocides. The dolphins and the whales were never, how do I put this, integrated into social time as much as human beings or four-legged animals were. Under the ocean, you never hear the clock bell ring.
No.
And because of that, you have a much different experience dealing with the fraud time. You only deal with the fraud time when a fraud time being is literally enforcing it onto you with a harpoon.
Right, Andrew, there's a question that's just come up from the chat room that I think is quite just about what we're talking about, the trees and how that's really appropriate. Somebody would like to know what happens when forests are clear-cut. What happens to the souls that were inhabiting those trees?
That's a really good question. I live out in logging country here in Yelm, and I've seen miles of trees butchered in days, and it does have a long-lasting spiritual effect on the land. It's much like having a limb cut off. The tree is still spiritually there and is still existing because inside its DNA skin suit, if a tree is cut down or is not taken down with natural manners, it doesn't go through the death process. It becomes a ghost tree. And a ghost tree isn't bound to its roots anymore. And after a while, they'll create ghost groves. And those ghost groves attempt to bring balance to all of the other parts of the forest that were integrated, the rabbit ghost network, the deers, the panthers, the pumas, etc. Every other animal, from the smallest microorganism to the tallest apex predator, will come to these ghost groves and begin to try to let go and to no longer be ghosts. And the ghosts become, and the ghost trees essentially become the angels of the forests. And after a while, some of these ghost trees that have been there a long time in these ghost groves can be taken over by negative forces, etc., etc., etc. And you can have extremely dangerous areas where some of the most nastiest entities go around because these ghost groves are now nurturing these nasty entities. Out here in where I live, I can point out a half dozen areas in the Bald Hills that were butchered 20 years ago, and it looks like nothing's changed in 20 years because of the type of butchering that they did. And they didn't replant anything, they didn't remove any of the stumps. Scotch room regrowed and all of it, and it's just an overgrown area that will take several hundred years for the stumps underneath the ground to compost.
Right. Andrew, there's another question that's just come in too that is a...
Hold on, I got one more part. Okay. So for a tree to actually go through a death process, it would be struck by lightning, killed by disease, or naturally fallen over from its old age. That's how a tree dies. It doesn't go through the death process like that. And a tree actually knows long before it's going to die because it has chosen its path in which it's going to fall or it's going to become compost, because it is that integrated into the respect of the nature. The trees are the givers of the forest.
That's really interesting, because I've never looked at it that way. Well, there's a really interesting question here about when we were talking about the karmic debt. You know, when I was talking about the chaos earlier, and this question is, what is the relationship between the call-in of karmic debt, just as you described, and the individual soul contracts that have karmic debt to balance?
Okay, let's think of an audit, a banker's audit sheet. You have profit, you have loss, you have accounts receivable, you have accounts payable, you have credits. Credits would be from other lifetimes, debits could be from other lifetimes, or other people who have access to your accounts that can debit and credit in their name, and you are the holder of said debt. So when we look at the question, so calling in of karmic debt, so if I am saying to an individual group of entities, I at this ever-present moment choose to bring to zero balance all of our debt, that is saying I'm bringing the karmic auditing and saying you can no longer have access to cook my spiritual books to satiate whatever your needs are. My books are my own spiritual audit and my own accounting. You have no control over that type of accounting when it comes to spiritual debt. Now, the other side, when we have individual soul contracts, many of them do not create debt, the contract itself. It is the beings who interact that create the debt that fulfills the contract. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's a really good explanation, Andrew. It makes a lot of sense to me.
In other scenarios, let's say you have an ancestral soul contract that's linked to a family crest. So when you're born, that family crest, which is controlled by an oversoul family, that is the karmic auditors of the full soul family, says, all right, you're born in 1984. In 1984, anyone that's born in this soul family is going to receive 10 million credits of spiritual debt from 200 AD when we did a whole bunch of bad stuff. So you're born, you have all this debt, you spiritually as a baby, you don't know what to do with it, and your first friend you meet happens to be somebody you were boyfriend, girlfriend with in 78 BC, in which you marauded the land and became pirates. So you have now added spiritual debt by having friends and going through that creative process, and that spiritual debt can be neutralized if, let's say, if you play cops and robbers with some of those people that you robbed as pirates in 87 BC. So once again, it is the execution that will depict the value of the debt. In other scenarios, let's say your first girlfriend or your first boyfriend turns out to be the worst thing that could have possibly happened to you in an ancestral debt way, is you came in with that contract, and that person, no matter what you think, no matter how deep your love was, it was going to turn out that way because the person was literally DNA pheromoned into it from your own energies. You were enforcing debt onto that lover and not even realizing it until finally that debt weighed them down and put them into karmic retribution, which then brings the disaster and the breakup.
So that carries on into the next lifetime?
It can carry on to the next lifetime, other lifetimes, other places too, because right. Debt is not just this little micro sheet living here. There is a macro self and a macro self above that, who have different scales of debt, who perceive debt differently, who deal debt out differently. Some abuse the rules of karmic interaction. There are others that want to use them as limited as possible because their goal is to be a zero karmic interaction being at all levels, dimensions, time streams, galaxies, and universes, because their sovereignty means so much to them.
Right, so then it's really applicable to, if you want to get to that 0 point, then really work with the revocations to disconnect from all that karmic baggage that we've got.
Mm-hmm. Learning how to do it on the fly, as if you were a groundling in the improv class, is one of those skills that you just have to take the time to learn. You know, people are wondered at the stuff that I just roll off of my tongue. That's from years and years and years of learning how to pray and to speak to nature. And I freely share that skill, and I encourage absolutely everyone to look at the contract revocations and make your own. If you want to start simple, take the opening lines that say you're opening a spiritual court of equity, and the very end line where it's saying you are honoring your free will by entering this into your Kirth-Akashic record, and use what I did as a study guide of the things you want to include in your own personal expression. Think of it as the old cheat book when you had to do a book report in 8th grade. There it is. There's all the main things that you need to know. You just need to put it in your own order, in your own way, so that when it rolls off of your tongue in that moment where a girlfriend's trying to break up with you, and you can go, right now, I ban you from using your energy to create shame, blame, or guilt in me. I remove your energy from me at this exact moment in time so this being may have clarity dealing with the chaotic energy you're projecting at me. Well, this scenario can be repeated for hundreds of times, a father and a wife having an argument, so on and so forth, countless number of ways that we can use that role of the power of the tongue and the voice and the heart to create that frequency that dispels the control that's trying to be impressed into you.
Right. So, Andrew, you ready for another question?
Sure. Let's go on to another one.
Okay. And this is a really interesting question. It's to do with our remote viewing, actually. And the question's about knowingness. And it's got when you just have a knowing without an actual picture, what is the best way to build the confidence and trust in self? Well, for myself in that situation, before I got any visuals, I had to really work with my knowingness. And the knowingness is if you already, in your knowingness, got a feeling of what something is, and then you got the actual, say, the feedback that that's what it was, then the confidence builds up. But just using your knowingness with something, you always get somewhere along the line where it gets validated, and that's where your confidence can come in. That's
right. That's where the confidence comes in. So another way of how to build up the trust to yourself, it really comes down to honestly loving yourself. Feeling love is really important. Okay? There are a lot of people out there that come to me for private sessions that have a hard time loving themselves. They can love everyone else, but they can't love themselves. So what does it take to love yourself? Is it just the self-hug, the smile, giving yourself that time? That's just one of the techniques that gets us into trusting ourselves and our intuition. So when we intuit a scenario, we become part of the implicate equation that has resolution or confirmation, such as in a remote viewing experiment or in another experience that allows you to get the self-confirmation of the mystical. So many people try to set their bar really high when it comes to a mystical experience. And in fact, you're having a mystical experience every day of your life that you wake up or go to sleep. That's true. So, Andrew, there is another really interesting question here, too, that we might just get time to get done. And this is, this says, how do we trim up a tree without causing it harm? Or do these trees have family and children structure? So when a big tree falls in a forest, it usually kills a smaller tree in its path. What is the relationship between them? Okay, as I was describing, the seeds that fall from certain trees, they're part of the lineage of soul family and migrations that come in. In general, when you're going to work with a tree, ask it. Or find the tallest tree in the area, and that is the chief totem of that area. And you ask, I would like to gather wood from this area, or I'm going to come and trim the trees so you have a delicate undergrowth so your great highs can bloom. And there may be other trees that say, don't trim my lower branches. Many deer and rabbit hide under my branches. And that's where those knowingness moments can come. For those people that are regular fire creators and have followed the path of the fire shaman and are doing their own fire ceremonies, When you go out and get wood, you can get wood that's been cut and split, or you can go and just gather wood in the forest, and it's everywhere. Little sticks, big hunks of wood, they're all there. And when you begin to gather an area, ask it, where would you like me to gather from? What of these trees that have gone through their death process would like to become part of my sacred fire? Or, conversely, what trees here now would like to give up some of their branches so I may have a starter fire? Where is the dry wood? Ask, and you shall receive. The field of plenty is there in great abundance for those that know how to manifest with the mind and the heart in union with the land that you're on.
Well, that's really good to know, Andrew, because I've got a lot of trees on my property, and some fall over, and then there's some that you just don't feel that you want to cut back. And so I've got quite a few fruit trees as well. There is another really good question that's just come up. I'd like to put that to you. It says, do the soul revocations only work to the level of awareness that you have, or do they also work at other levels that, Andrew, you just referred to?
They work on all levels, especially when we begin to understand we are in a hierarchical order, and the only way out of the hierarchical order is to declare yourself the apex of your own hierarchical self. That's the paradox. Once you become the paradox, the apex of your own I am present self in the now, in a hierarchical system that's a planet, and you declare your sovereign free will, from that point forth, your contracts affect you in all levels, time streams, and galaxies and universes. Can they have negative effects? No, because the I am present self is never going to do something that would take away from its unity expression of sovereignty. And there is that innate knowingness. And I know there are a lot of people that come for the first time and say contract revocations they've never done for me and have never read them out loud. And for some of those people that come and have sessions with me, and I make them do it out loud because I know they're really haunted, and they break down into tears, and so some of the most innocuous parts of the contract revocations, because what's written in there is forcing them to realize that at some level they gave away their power, a severe amount of their power, and that this contract revocation is giving it back in sacred neutrality and giving them no debt as they're regaining parts of their sovereignty. And on some other levels, when a person first starts, you know, so many people had intense experiences from them. So yes, it does affect you. And if you do it once and you have a great experience from it, and you find yourself 3 weeks later having only done it once, ask yourself why. If you can't repeat and do them regularly until they become second nature to you, you are missing the whole point of the teaching. Sovereignty is at all times. It isn't just when you go, "Rah! I declare my sovereignty now," like a caveman and beat around with my big karmic retribution stick. No. It's those quiet moments before you go to sleep where you can have a short soliloquy with the banking community that says, you will not give me debt while I'm asleep, and I will have debt-free dreams.
I find for myself, Andrew, that, like you said, just doing it once, it's powerful, but the more I've done it, you know, and I alternate the different ones. I don't do the whole lot all at once. I pick out each one, just which one just really feels that I need to do. Mm-hmm. And I just find such a sense of relief and release in my energetic field. And I suppose that I feel that the more that I do it, the more I can disconnect. And the thing is, every day we're subjected to some form of contractual domination. And like with the banking system and all sorts of different things that we have to sign for, and our driver's license, there's everything that we are absolutely hooked into. And so I find that doing these revocations regularly keeps you more that sovereign, free-willed energy.
It's like tending the fences on a 1,000-acre farm. Your cattle don't get out and your chupacabra don't get in. Think of it, of a 1,000-mile farm. That's what your sacred space is. And the contract revocations are you tending the fences. That's a very good metaphor for people to use. And then there's more powerful forms of contract revocation where you are beating your chest in front of a ceremonial fire. And then that's the inner layer where all the cattle are stored in the wood fences, so on and so forth, so on. And yes, we compartmentalize ourselves. And part of contract revocation is giving the compartment definition so we can change its definition. So we aren't slaves in a system, but 100% free will, and that our DNA's memories don't indicate to us to follow slave concepts from the very beginnings of our lives. We have 100% DNA memory control, and when we exercise it, we get results.
So I know that for myself that really works, and I know that you know, if other people really take that on, have also felt some sort of release and healing. I know that there's some great ones that have been put out on your blog sites as well, and just been incredibly healing.
Mm-hmm.
Are you open for another question?
1 second, actually. Let me see if I had a document that was shared with me. 1 second. Here we go. All right, I'm going to read the soul contract revocation for the pharmaceutical company. Now, this was written by a lady who's going through stage 4 cancer. We're going to put her entire story up on the blog. But she did exactly. She took the essence of her death and life control experience and said, I'm going to write something that can be passed to the future people. And I commend this person in all ways for sharing this, and we intend to share her story far and wide. So here's the soul contract revocation for the pharmaceutical industry. I call to all spiritual contracts that exist within my past, present, and future beings, selves, and existence in this dimension and time stream, and all time streams above and below the Earth-centric sine wave of coexistence. At this exact moment, in the ever-present co-creating moment, I summon all DNA lineage ancestors to create a unified, proper spiritual court of equity, so I may find remedy and resolve with all contracts that have inserted fine print during the pre-birth and birth process. I call forth the proper spiritual court of equity to hear my decree of contract removal. I revoke all spiritual contracts with the pharmaceutical industry of this planet, cultural programming, societal mindsets, belief systems, and delivery systems that dominate and control healing and recovery programs, and create an energetic imbalance that impacts every man, woman, and child on this our world. I call forth all ancestors of all soul relations. I call forth all ancestors of all soul relations to hold space in this spiritual court of equity. I call to Earth Mother and all her light denizens within all inner and outer space to come forward and occupy this spiritual court of equity. O great mystery, who is the source of all power, I call to you. Grant me the knowledge to balance my way of being, so I may heal myself, my family, my tribe, my nation, and our Mother Earth. I hereby revoke all energetic contracts with the pharmaceutical industry that promotes the overuse of chemicals in circumstances where they are unnecessary and sometimes deliberately detrimental to the health and well-being of all of humanity. I do not consent to advertising campaigns, commercials, endorsements, and all other forms of publicity that promote a one-sided view of treatment offered by pharmaceutical medications, deliberately misleading consumers into believing that drugs are the only effective, scientifically recognized remedy while generating disinformation about the use of safe, natural, non-toxic alternatives, suppressing and dismissing their uses. I hereby revoke all societal belief systems that adhere to the assumption that vaccines are remedies for diseases, instead of promoting healthy lifestyles that support the human body's best defense against microbes, a healthy immune system that is supported by a global, proactive health measures, universal access to pure water, wholesome food, necessary supplements, proper hygiene, healing treatments that strengthen and complement the human body, comfortable housing, a happy, ethical, spiritually sound workplace, and a caring, supportive community. I do not consent to the deliberate manufacture of viruses with the intention of depopulating targeted groups, races, or nationalities. I withdraw my energy from covert branches of an industry that secretly developed any form of gas or chemical agents that can be used to control, eradicate, or exterminate targeted groups, races, and populations. I do not consent to the manufacture of precursor chemicals used for the production of any addictive substance, including cocaine and heroin and all synthetic psychotropic chemicals that are used to deliberately to entrap and ensnare unwitting humans who are lured into their consumption. 1 second. Lured into their company. I do not consent to the profit-driven motivations that seek, exploit, control, and poison humanity, including any affiliations with the black market narcotics, overuse and misuse of tranquilizers, and any other mind-altering and behavior-altering substance, such as Ritalin, substances that dull and suppress the human spirit, lessening its ability to awaken and respond to its inner voice. I hereby revoke all spiritual contracts with the medical industry that have compromised an infant's health and immune system by replacing breast milk with baby formulas and introduced grain-based baby foods to infants prematurely, and in so doing potentially damaging their immune systems. Promoting the consumption of manufactured food for profit is an agenda that does not serve the health and well-being of humanity. I do not consent to the inclusion of aspartame, dyes, synthetic preservatives, and any agents such as magnesium stearate that are used only to accelerate production and thereby increase profit. I do not consent to the mindset that fluoride is necessary for cavity prevention and dental health, and such needs to be added to public drinking water, blatantly rejecting the documentary proof of the hazards this toxic chemical wreaks upon the endocrine system of the human body. I hereby revoke all belief systems that the medical systems have an exclusive monopoly on deciding what therapies are offered to patients, excluding natural, holistic remedies because they remove profits from pharmaceutical companies. I do not consent to the draconian treatments that promote and prolong suffering because they pander to a voracious, parasitic agenda that saps the energy and devalues the dignity of the human species going through the death process. I revoke all belief systems that drugs can supersede the natural healing power of the human body, and the philosophy that supports swallowing a pill or ingesting a chemical instead of following a proactive lifestyle that nurtures and respects the needs of the human body and the human heart. I trust and honor the wisdom of my body and the power of my soul. I am a God, sovereign, free-willed being. I call forth all ancestors to honor the reading of my free will and enter into the earth Akashic record for all sentient kind to understand our freedom comes with the use of free will at all times. That's powerful.
Yeah, that really hits the spot. And I'm sure that hits a lot of other people too in a lot of areas that their children have been subjected to a lot of these drugs as well. It covers everything.
Yes. And we are going to, as I said, be making this available on the blog. I kind of popped it out a little early and I wasn't prepared. It just felt absolutely right at the end of the show to bring this out. Because Debbie, this has been a wonderful conversation and this hour has just flown by.
I've enjoyed every minute of it, Andrew, and I'm always learned something so exquisite every time I listen to you.
Yeah, I just enjoy having these wonderful conversations. Anyway, so we're going to call a close to this episode. So this coming Tuesday at, I believe, 5 o'clock Pacific. If not, you can go to the events page on galactichistorian.com, and you click on the events and calendar page, and you will see when all of our live shows that are up and coming. If you'd like to go and sign up for the League of Consciousness Explorers, please head over to the sign up page right now. Thanks a lot, everyone, for joining the show. Debbie and Kat, that's doing our producing in the background. Let's have a good future show. Thanks a lot, everyone. Catch you next week.
Thank you. Namaste.